In the final days of World War II, Adolf Hitler found himself cornered in the Furabonka, a fortified underground shelter beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. As the Allied forces closed in from all sides, the atmosphere within the bunker grew increasingly tense and desperate. This period, often referred to as Hitler's last stand, encapsulates the chaotic collapse of the Nazi regime and serves as a critical moment in understanding the broader implications of the war. The historical context surrounding these events is essential for grasping the magnitude of what transpired. By April 1945, the Third Reich was crumbling. Soviet troops were advancing into Berlin, while Western allies were liberating territories across Europe. Hitler, who had once envisioned a 1,000-year Reich, was now faced with the grim reality of imminent defeat. The bunker became a microcosm of his delusions and the crumbling ideology that had fueled the war. Within its walls, Hitler surrounded himself with a small circle of loyalists, including high-ranking officials and military leaders who were equally trapped in a web of denial and despair. As the situation deteriorated, the atmosphere shifted from one of fervent loyalty to a palpable sense of hopelessness. The bunker was not just a physical space, it represented the last vestiges of a regime that had brought untold suffering and destruction across Europe. Understanding this pivotal moment is crucial for history enthusiasts, as it highlights the psychological and political dynamics at play during the war's conclusion. The decisions made in those final days had far-reaching consequences, shaping the post-war landscape of Europe and influencing global politics for decades to come. By examining Hitler's last stand, we gain insight into the mindset of a dictator who, even in the face of overwhelming odds, clung to power and delusion. This exploration is not merely about the end of one man's reign, but about the broader implications of totalitarianism, the fragility of power, and the human capacity for denial in the face of inevitable defeat. As we delve into the events that unfolded within the Furabonka, we will uncover the complex interplay of loyalty, betrayal, and desperation that characterized Hitler's final days. This narrative serves as a reminder of the importance of understanding history, not just as a series of events, but as a reflection of human behavior and societal dynamics. The significance of this moment extends beyond the confines of the bunker. It resonates with contemporary discussions about leadership, accountability, and the consequences of unchecked power. By engaging with this topic, we not only honor the memory of those who suffered during the war, but also equip ourselves with the knowledge to recognize the warning signs of tyranny in our own time. As we embark on this journey through history, we invite you to reflect on the lessons learned from Hitler's last stand and consider how they apply to our world today. The story of the Furabonka is one of tragedy, but it is also one of resilience and the enduring human spirit. Understanding this chapter of history is essential for fostering a more informed and engaged citizenry, capable of recognizing the complexities of power and the importance of safeguarding democracy. Join us as we explore the final days of Adolf Hitler, the dynamics within the Furabonka, and the lasting impact of this pivotal moment in World War II. Through this examination, we aim to provide a comprehensive and engaging narrative that not only informs but also inspires critical thinking about the past and its relevance to our present and future. As the Allies closed in on Germany in the spring of 1945, the country found itself in a state of disarray, both geographically and politically. The once mighty Third Reich was crumbling under the weight of its own hubris, with the remnants of its military forces struggling to mount any effective resistance against the advancing enemy. Geographically, Germany was a battleground, with the Allies making significant gains on multiple fronts. From the west, American, British, and Canadian forces were pushing through the Rhineland and into the heart of Germany, liberating towns and cities as they advanced. Meanwhile, from the east, the Soviet Red Army was making rapid progress, having already captured key territories in Eastern Europe and now poised to storm Berlin itself. This dual assault created a sense of encirclement that was palpable as the walls closed in on the Nazi leadership and their last strongholds. Politically, the landscape was equally bleak. The Nazi regime, once characterized by its totalitarian grip on power, was now facing widespread collapse. Hitler's leadership had become increasingly erratic, and the infighting among his inner circle had reached a fever pitch. As the Allies advanced, morale among German troops and civilians alike plummeted. Many soldiers were disillusioned, realizing that the war was lost, while civilians faced the harsh realities of bombings, food shortages, and the chaos of a collapsing state. The propaganda that had once fueled the Nazi ideology was now falling on deaf ears as the grim reality of defeat set in. The German populace was caught in a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty, with many grappling with the consequences of a regime that had led them into a catastrophic war. Amidst this turmoil, the Furabonka emerged as the last refuge for Adolf Hitler and his inner circle. Located beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, this underground complex was designed to withstand aerial bombardments and serve as a secure command center. As the situation deteriorated above ground, the bunker became a symbol of Hitler's final stand, a place where he and his closest advisors sought to maintain a semblance of control in a rapidly disintegrating world. The Furabonka was not just a physical shelter. It represented the last bastion of a regime that had once dominated Europe. Within its walls, Hitler surrounded himself with loyalists, including high-ranking military officials and party members, who were equally trapped in a web of denial and desperation. As the Allies continued their relentless advance, the atmosphere within the Furabonka grew increasingly tense. Hitler's delusions of victory persisted, even as the reality of defeat loomed large. He clung to the belief that a miraculous turnaround was possible, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The bunker became a microcosm of the Nazi regime's final days, filled with discussions of military strategies that were increasingly unrealistic and a refusal to acknowledge the dire situation outside. The inner circle, while loyal to Hitler, was also grappling with their own fears and doubts, leading to a toxic environment of paranoia and mistrust. The geographical and political landscape of Germany during this time was marked by chaos and despair. Cities lay in ruins, and the once proud German military was in disarray, struggling to fend off the advancing Allies. The civilian population faced the harsh realities of war, with many displaced and living in fear of bombings and violence. As the Allies pushed deeper into German territory, the sense of impending doom grew, and the reality of the Nazi regime's collapse became undeniable. The Furabonka, as the last refuge for Hitler and his inner circle, stood as a stark reminder of the regime's fall from grace. It was a place where the echoes of past triumphs were drowned out by the sounds of impending defeat. In this context, Understanding the situation in Germany as the Allies closed in is crucial for grasping the complexities of the final days of World War II. The geographical and political landscape painted a picture of a nation on the brink of collapse, with the Furabonka serving as a poignant symbol of the end of an era. As we delve deeper into this tumultuous period, we will explore the dynamics within the bunker, the decisions made by Hitler and his advisors, and the broader implications of their actions as the world watched the final act of a tragic chapter in history unfold. The story of Germany's last stand is not just about the fall of a dictator. It is a reflection of the consequences of totalitarianism, the fragility of power, and the enduring impact of war on a nation and its people. Trudi Junge, a lesser-known figure within the chaotic confines of the Furabonka, played a unique role during the final days of Adolf Hitler's regime. As a secretary and personal assistant to Hitler, Junge was intimately connected to the inner workings of the Nazi leadership. Her position allowed her to witness firsthand the unraveling of the Third Reich, providing a perspective that is both compelling and complex. In the film Downfall, which dramatizes the last days of Hitler and the fall of Berlin, Junge's character is portrayed with a depth that captures the turmoil and moral dilemmas faced by those who remained loyal to the Führer, even as the world around them collapsed. In Downfall, Trudi Junge is depicted as a young woman caught in the throes of a regime that is rapidly disintegrating. Her character embodies the conflicting emotions experienced by many who served in the bunker during this tumultuous time. As the Allies advanced and the reality of defeat became increasingly apparent, Junge's loyalty to Hitler was put to the test. The film illustrates her experiences as she navigates the tension between her duty to serve the Führer and her growing awareness of the moral implications of the regime's actions. This internal conflict is a central theme in her portrayal, highlighting the struggle between loyalty to a leader and the ethical considerations of supporting a regime responsible for immense suffering and destruction. Junge's perspective in the bunker is particularly poignant as she grapples with the consequences of her loyalty. Throughout the film, viewers witness her interactions with other key figures in the bunker, including Hitler himself, as well as the growing sense of despair among those trapped within its walls. The atmosphere is charged with tension, and Junge's character reflects the fear and uncertainty that permeated the bunker. As she types out orders and listens to Hitler's increasingly erratic speeches, she is acutely aware of the disconnect between his delusions of victory and the grim reality outside. This juxtaposition creates a powerful narrative that underscores the moral complexities faced by individuals like Junge, who found themselves inextricably linked to a regime that was crumbling under the weight of its own atrocities. The film also delves into Junge's relationships with other bunker inhabitants, showcasing her interactions with figures such as Joseph Goebbels and Eva Braun. These relationships further complicate her internal conflict as she witnesses the unwavering loyalty of those around her, even as they cling to a dying ideology. Junge's character serves as a lens through which the audience can explore the psychological toll of loyalty in the face of moral ambiguity. Her experiences highlight the struggle to reconcile personal beliefs with the demands of loyalty to a leader who has led the nation into ruin. As the situation in Berlin deteriorates, Junge's internal conflict intensifies. The film poignantly captures her moments of doubt and reflection as she grapples with the implications of her role in the bunker. The juxtaposition of her youthful idealism against the backdrop of a regime in its death creates a powerful narrative arc. Junger's character becomes a symbol of the many individuals who found themselves torn between their loyalty to a leader and their growing awareness of the moral consequences of that loyalty. This internal struggle is not just a personal battle. It reflects the broader moral dilemmas faced by those who served the Nazi regime, raising questions about complicity and accountability. In the final moments of the film, as the bunker descends into chaos and despair, Junger's character is forced to confront the reality of her situation. The once loyal assistant is now faced with the stark choice of whether to continue supporting a regime that has brought devastation to millions or to seek a way out of the moral quagmire. This moment of reckoning is emblematic of the broader themes explored in Downfall, as it challenges viewers to consider the complexities of loyalty, morality, and the human capacity for denial in the face of overwhelming evidence. Trudi Junger's role in the bunker serves as a poignant reminder of the personal struggles faced by individuals caught in the web of a totalitarian regime. Her experiences, as depicted in Downfall, highlight the internal conflicts that arise when loyalty to a leader clashes with the moral implications of that loyalty. As the film unfolds, Junger's character becomes a symbol of the many who grappled with their conscience during a time of unprecedented turmoil. By exploring her perspective, we gain insight into the psychological and emotional toll of serving a regime that was ultimately responsible for immense suffering and destruction. In doing so, we are reminded of the importance of examining the complexities of human behavior in the face of moral dilemmas, particularly in the context of one of history's darkest chapters. The film Downfall, directed by Oliver Hirschbiegel, offers a complex and multifaceted portrayal of Adolf Hitler during the final days of World War II. While the film is grounded in historical events, it also delves into the psychological dimensions of Hitler's character, presenting a more human side of the infamous dictator. This nuanced depiction invites viewers to grapple with the complexities of his personality, the motivations behind his actions, and the dynamics within the Furabonka as the Third Reich crumbled. One of the most striking aspects of Downfall is its ability to humanize Hitler, albeit in a way that does not absolve him of his heinous actions. The film presents him as a deeply flawed individual, grappling with fear, paranoia, and delusion as the reality of his impending defeat becomes increasingly apparent. This portrayal is particularly evident in scenes where Hitler interacts with his inner circle, revealing moments of vulnerability and desperation. For instance, his outbursts of rage are juxtaposed with moments of introspection, showcasing a man who, despite his monstrous deeds, is still capable of experiencing fear and despair. This complexity challenges the audience to consider the psychological factors that contributed to his tyrannical rule, moving beyond the simplistic caricature of a one-dimensional villain. The film's depiction of historical events is rooted in extensive research and draws from first-hand accounts, including the memoirs of those who were present in the Furabonka during its final days. While some artistic liberties are taken for dramatic effect, the core events portrayed in Downfall align closely with historical records. The film captures the chaotic atmosphere of Berlin as the Allies closed in, illustrating the desperation of Hitler and his followers as they clung to the remnants of power. The accuracy of the film's depiction of key figures such as Joseph Goebbels and Eva Braun further enhances its authenticity, providing a glimpse into the dynamics of loyalty and betrayal that characterize the bunker environment. Downfall places a significant emphasis on the psychological state of Hitler and his followers, exploring the impact of their unwavering loyalty to a failing regime. As the film progresses, viewers witness the deterioration of Hitler's mental state, marked by increasing paranoia and irrational decision-making. His refusal to accept defeat becomes a central theme, illustrating how his delusions of grandeur blinded him to the reality of the situation. This psychological unraveling is mirrored in the behavior of those around him as they grapple with their own fears and doubts while remaining loyal to a leader who has led them into ruin. The film effectively captures the toxic atmosphere of the bunker, where loyalty is tested against the backdrop of impending doom. The portrayal of Hitler's psychological state is further accentuated by the film's cinematography and direction. Hirschbiegel employs close-ups and intense framing to convey the emotional weight of key moments, allowing viewers to witness the internal struggles of the characters. The use of lighting and sound design enhances the tension, creating an immersive experience that draws the audience into the bunker's claustrophobic environment. This artistic approach not only serves to humanize Hitler, but also invites viewers to reflect on the broader implications of his leadership style and the psychological mechanisms that enabled his rise to power. In addition to exploring Hitler's character, Downfall also examines the dynamics of his inner circle, highlighting the complexities of loyalty and the moral dilemmas faced by those who remained by his side. Figures like Goebbels and Junger are portrayed with depth, showcasing their unwavering commitment to Hitler even as the regime crumbled around them. This focus on the psychological state of Hitler's followers adds another layer of complexity to the narrative, prompting viewers to consider the nature of loyalty in the face of moral ambiguity. The film raises important questions about complicity and the extent to which individuals are willing to sacrifice their own ethics for the sake of loyalty to a leader. Ultimately, Downfall presents a portrayal of Hitler that is both human and monstrous, capturing the complexities of his character while remaining grounded in historical accuracy. The film's exploration of his psychological state and the dynamics within the Furabonka provides a compelling narrative that challenges viewers to confront the darker aspects of human nature. By humanizing Hitler, the film invites audiences to reflect on the psychological mechanisms that can lead individuals to commit atrocities, emphasizing the importance of understanding history not just as a series of events, but as a reflection of the complexities of human behavior. Downfall serves as a powerful exploration of Adolf Hitler's final days, presenting a nuanced portrayal that balances historical accuracy with psychological depth. The film's ability to humanize a figure often viewed solely as a monster encourages viewers to grapple with the complexities of loyalty, morality, and the psychological factors that contribute to the rise and fall of tyrants. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that understanding Hitler's character and the dynamics of his inner circle is essential for comprehending the broader implications of his regime and the lessons that can be drawn from this dark chapter in history. In the final days of World War II, Adolf Hitler's physical and mental decline became increasingly evident as he retreated into the confines of the Furabonka. The once dominant figure who had commanded the Nazi regime with an iron fist, was now a shadow of his former self, grappling with a range of health issues that mirrored the crumbling state of his empire. This decline was marked by a series of alarming symptoms, including tremors, weight loss, and a general deterioration of his physical appearance. These health issues were compounded by the immense stress of impending defeat, which took a significant toll on his mental state and leadership capabilities. One of the most noticeable symptoms of Hitler's declining health was the presence of tremors, particularly in his hands. These tremors, often attributed to a combination of Parkinson's disease and the effects of long-term drug use, became increasingly pronounced as the war progressed. In the bunker, observers noted that Hitler struggled to maintain a steady grip on objects, and his hands would shake uncontrollably during meetings. This physical manifestation of his deteriorating health served as a stark reminder of his vulnerability, contrasting sharply with the image of strength and control he had cultivated throughout his rise to power. The tremors not only affected his physical capabilities, but also contributed to a growing perception among his inner circle that he was losing his grip on reality. In addition to tremors, Hitler's overall physical condition deteriorated significantly during these final days. Reports indicated that he had lost a considerable amount of weight, and his once vibrant complexion had become pale and gaunt. The stress of the situation, coupled with his increasingly erratic behavior, contributed to a decline in his overall health. He was often seen with dark circles under his eyes, a reflection of sleepless nights spent in anxiety over the fate of the Reich. This physical decline was emblematic of the broader collapse of the Nazi regime, as Hitler's health issues mirrored the disintegration of the power structure he had built. The impact of stress and defeat on Hitler's leadership was profound. As the Allies closed in on Berlin, his mental state became increasingly unstable. The once charismatic leader, who had inspired fervent loyalty among his followers, began to exhibit signs of paranoia and delusion. He increasingly isolated himself from reality, refusing to acknowledge the dire circumstances surrounding him. In the bunker, he would often lash out at those who dared to present him with unfavorable news, displaying a volatile temperament that reflected his desperation. This shift in behavior not only alienated his inner circle, but also undermined his ability to lead effectively during a critical juncture in the war. Hitler's mental decline was further exacerbated by the overwhelming sense of defeat that permeated the bunker. As Soviet forces advanced on Berlin, the atmosphere became one of despair and hopelessness. His once unwavering confidence was replaced by a sense of impending doom, leading to erratic decision-making and a refusal to consider alternative strategies. The psychological toll of defeat manifested in his increasingly irrational behavior, as he clung to the belief that a miraculous turnaround was possible, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This disconnect from reality not only affected his leadership, but also contributed to the growing disillusionment among those who remained loyal to him. The reactions of those around Hitler to his deteriorating condition were varied and complex. Many of his inner circle, including high-ranking officials and military leaders, were acutely aware of his declining health and the impact it had on their ability to function effectively. Some, like Joseph Goebbels, remained fiercely loyal, attempting to bolster Hitler's spirits even as the situation grew increasingly dire. Others, however, began to question his judgment and leadership capabilities. The atmosphere in the bunker was charged with tension, as loyalty was tested against the backdrop of a crumbling regime. The fear of retribution for dissenting opinions further complicated the dynamics, leading to a culture of silence and complicity that allowed Hitler's delusions to persist unchecked. As Hitler's health continued to decline, the reactions of those around him became increasingly fraught with anxiety. Some of his closest advisors, recognizing the gravity of the situation, attempted to shield him from the harsh realities of defeat. They engaged in a delicate balancing act, trying to maintain a facade of loyalty while grappling with their own doubts about his leadership. This environment of fear and uncertainty contributed to a sense of isolation for Hitler, as he became increasingly disconnected from the realities of the war and the consequences of his decisions. In the final days of the bunker, the combination of Hitler's physical and mental decline created a tragic portrait of a leader who had once commanded immense power but was now reduced to a state of desperation. His tremors and weight loss served as visible reminders of his vulnerability, while the stress of impending defeat eroded his mental faculties and decision-making abilities. The reactions of those around him reflected a complex interplay of loyalty, fear, and disillusionment, as they grappled with the reality of a regime in its death throes. Ultimately, Hitler's decline was not just a personal tragedy. It symbolized the collapse of a totalitarian regime that had brought devastation to millions, leaving a legacy of suffering and destruction in its wake. The Furabonka, located beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, served as the last refuge for Adolf Hitler and his inner circle during the final days of World War II. This underground complex was designed to withstand aerial bombardments, featuring thick concrete walls and a series of interconnected rooms that provided a semblance of security amid the chaos above. However, the conditions within the bunker were far from comfortable. The atmosphere was stifling, both physically and psychologically, as the weight of impending defeat bore down on its inhabitants. The layout of the bunker included a command room, living quarters, and offices for key personnel, all of which were dimly lit and poorly ventilated, contributing to a sense of claustrophobia that permeated the space. The command room, where Hitler often held meetings with his generals and advisors, was the epicenter of decision-making during these tumultuous days. It was here that the atmosphere shifted from one of fervent loyalty to palpable despair. The walls were adorned with maps detailing the progress of the war, but as the Allies advanced, these maps became increasingly grim. The tension in the room was thick, as Hitler's generals were acutely aware of the dire situation outside. The interactions between Hitler and his military leaders were marked by a complex mix of fear, loyalty, and frustration. Many of the generals, who had once commanded vast armies, now found themselves in a position of impotence, forced to listen to Hitler's increasingly erratic orders while grappling with the reality of their impending defeat. Hitler's demeanor during these meetings was often volatile. He oscillated between moments of rage and despair, lashing out at those who dared to present unfavorable news or question his strategies. His generals, including figures like Wilhelm Keitel and Alfred Jodl, were caught in a difficult position. They were expected to demonstrate unwavering loyalty to the Führer, yet they were also acutely aware that the war was lost. This created a tense dynamic in which many generals felt compelled to agree with Hitler's increasingly delusional plans, even as they internally recognized the futility of his directives. The fear of retribution for dissenting opinions loomed large, leading to a culture of silence and complicity that allowed Hitler's delusions to persist unchecked. The psychological toll of the situation was evident in the interactions among those in the bunker. As the reality of defeat set in, the atmosphere shifted from one of fervent loyalty to a sense of impending doom. The once unquestioned authority of Hitler began to wane, and the generals who had once been his staunch supporters started to exhibit signs of disillusionment. The tension in the room was palpable as they exchanged glances filled with unspoken fears and doubts. The weight of their loyalty to a failing leader clashed with their understanding of the catastrophic consequences of his decisions. This internal conflict created a charged atmosphere where the fear of speaking out was matched only by the desperation to find a way out of the impending catastrophe. As the days wore on, the sense of impending doom became increasingly pronounced within the bunker. The sounds of artillery fire and the distant rumble of advancing Soviet troops served as constant reminders of the reality outside. The psychological strain of living in such close quarters, combined with the knowledge that their world was collapsing, took a toll on the mental health of those inside. The bunker, once a symbol of power and control, had transformed into a claustrophobic prison, where the walls seemed to close in on its inhabitants. The air was thick with anxiety, and the conversations that once revolved around military strategy shifted to discussions of survival and escape. The interactions among the bunker's inhabitants reflected this growing sense of despair. As the situation deteriorated, the camaraderie that had once characterized their relationships began to fray. The stress of impending defeat led to moments of tension and conflict as individuals grappled with their own fears and the reality of their circumstances. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of loyalty and betrayal, as some began to question the wisdom of following a leader who had led them to the brink of destruction. The psychological strain of the situation manifested in heated arguments and emotional outbursts, further exacerbating the already fraught dynamics within the bunker. In the face of this impending doom, some individuals attempted to maintain a sense of normalcy. Hitler's inner circle, including figures like Joseph Goebbels and Eva Braun, sought to create a facade of stability amid the chaos. They engaged in discussions about the future, clinging to the hope that a miracle might occur to turn the tide of the war. However, these attempts at normalcy were often met with skepticism and despair from others in the bunker, who recognized the futility of such optimism. The atmosphere became increasingly polarized, with some clinging to loyalty and denial, while others succumbed to the weight of reality. The dynamics within the Furabonka during these final days were characterized by a complex interplay of loyalty, fear, and despair. The layout and conditions of the bunker contributed to a stifling atmosphere, where the psychological toll of impending defeat weighed heavily on its inhabitants. The interactions between Hitler and his generals reflected the tension between loyalty and disillusionment, as they grappled with the reality of their situation. As the sounds of war grew louder and the walls of the bunker closed in, the sense of impending doom became an inescapable reality, marking the tragic end of a regime that had once wielded immense power but was now reduced to a desperate struggle for survival. In the final days of Adolf Hitler's life, a series of key events unfolded within the confines of the Furabonka, ultimately leading to his suicide on April 30th, 1945. As the situation in Berlin grew increasingly dire, Hitler's decisions became increasingly desperate and erratic, reflecting his refusal to accept the reality of his impending defeat. The atmosphere in the bunker was charged with tension as the weight of the crumbling Third Reich bore down on its inhabitants. Amidst this chaos, emotional moments were shared between Hitler and his longtime companion Eva Braun as they faced the end together. The reactions of those who chose to stay in the bunker or attempt to escape further illustrated the complex dynamics at play during these final hours. As the Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, Hitler made several significant decisions that underscored his determination to maintain control, even in the face of overwhelming odds. One of his first major decisions was to refuse to consider any possibility of surrender. Instead, he insisted on fighting to the last man, believing that a miraculous turnaround could still occur. This delusion was evident in his meetings with military leaders, where he continued to issue orders for counter-offensives that were increasingly unrealistic. His insistence on maintaining a facade of strength and control led to a growing sense of frustration among his generals, who recognized the futility of his plans. As the situation deteriorated, Hitler's decisions became more erratic, culminating in a series of increasingly desperate measures to hold on to power. Amidst the chaos of the bunker, emotional moments were shared between Hitler and Eva Braun, who had been by his side for over a decade. Their relationship, often characterized by a sense of detachment from the realities of the world outside, took on a poignant quality as they faced the end together. In the days leading up to their deaths, Braun attempted to provide comfort to Hitler, who was increasingly consumed by despair and paranoia. The couple shared intimate moments, reflecting on their life together and the choices that had led them to this point. These interactions were marked by a mix of tenderness and tragedy, as they clung to each other in the face of impending doom. Braun's unwavering loyalty to Hitler, even in the darkest of times, highlighted the complexities of their relationship and the emotional toll of their circumstances. As the situation in Berlin became increasingly desperate, the reactions of those in the bunker varied widely. Some individuals, like Joseph Goebbels and his family, chose to remain loyal to Hitler until the very end, believing that their fate was intertwined with that of the Führer. Goebbels, in particular, was unwavering in his commitment, even as the reality of defeat loomed large. He and his wife, Magda, made the decision to stay in the bunker, ultimately leading to their tragic fate alongside their children. This loyalty was emblematic of the deep-seated ideology that had driven many to follow Hitler, even as the regime crumbled around them. Conversely, others in the bunker began to contemplate escape as the situation grew increasingly dire. Figures like Wilhelm Keitel and Alfred Jodl, who had once been staunch supporters of Hitler, recognized the futility of their loyalty and the inevitability of defeat. Some sought to leave the bunker in search of safety, while others were paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. The atmosphere was charged with tension as individuals grappled with their own moral dilemmas and the consequences of their choices. The decision to stay or leave became a reflection of the broader struggle between loyalty and survival, as the reality of their circumstances weighed heavily on their minds. As the final hours approached, Hitler's mental state continued to deteriorate. He became increasingly isolated, retreating into a world of delusion where he believed that he could still turn the tide of the war. In his last meetings with his generals, he issued orders that were met with disbelief and frustration. The sense of impending doom was palpable as the sounds of artillery grew louder and the reality of Soviet forces closing in became undeniable. In these moments, the emotional weight of the situation became overwhelming, and the atmosphere in the bunker shifted from one of fervent loyalty to despair. On April 30th, 1945, as the Soviet troops breached the city, Hitler and Eva Braun made the fateful decision to end their lives together. In a final act of defiance against the reality of their situation, they chose to take their own lives rather than face capture. Hitler's suicide was marked by a sense of finality, as he left behind a legacy of destruction and chaos. The emotional moments shared between him and Braun in their final hours served as a poignant reminder of the personal toll of their choices, even as the world outside descended into chaos. The reactions of those who remained in the bunker after Hitler's death were varied. Some, like Goebbels, chose to carry on the fight, while others recognized the futility of their situation. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of grief, anger, and despair as they grappled with the reality of their leader's demise. The decision to stay or leave had profound implications for those who remained, as they faced the consequences of their loyalty to a regime that had ultimately led them to ruin. The key events leading to Hitler's suicide were marked by significant decisions made in the bunker, emotional moments shared between him and Eva Braun, and the varied reactions of those who chose to stay or leave. As the walls of the Furabonka closed in, the atmosphere shifted from one of loyalty to despair, culminating in a tragic end that would forever alter the course of history. The final days of Hitler and those around him serve as a powerful reminder of the complexities of loyalty, love, and the human experience in the face of overwhelming adversity. The immediate aftermath of Adolf Hitler's suicide on April 30th, 1945, plunged the Furabonka and the city of Berlin into a state of chaos and despair. As news of Hitler's death spread among those remaining in the bunker, the reactions were varied and complex, reflecting the deep-seated loyalty, fear, and uncertainty that characterized the final days of the Nazi regime. The atmosphere shifted dramatically from one of fervent allegiance to a palpable sense of impending doom, as the reality of their situation began to sink in. Within the bunker, the reactions of those who had remained loyal to Hitler were marked by shock and disbelief. Many of his inner circle, including high-ranking officials and military leaders, were left grappling with the sudden loss of their leader. Figures like Joseph Goebbels, who had been one of Hitler's most devoted supporters, were faced with the harsh reality of a regime that was crumbling without its Führer. Goebbels, who had long been a staunch advocate of Hitler's ideology, was devastated by the news. He had dedicated his life to promoting the Nazi cause and was now confronted with the collapse of everything he had believed in. In the immediate aftermath, he attempted to rally those around him, urging them to continue the fight against the advancing Soviet forces. But the fervor of his earlier convictions was now tinged with desperation. Magda Goebbels, Joseph's wife, shared in her husband's despair, but also faced her own moral dilemma. As the couple grappled with the reality of their situation, Magda made a harrowing decision regarding the fate of their children. In a tragic act of loyalty to Hitler and the regime, she chose to end the lives of her 6 children rather than allow them to fall into the hands of the Soviets. This decision was emblematic of the extreme lengths to which some individuals would go to protect their ideology and maintain a sense of control in the face of chaos. The Goebbels family's tragic fate unfolded in the bunker, where Magda administered poison to her children before taking her own life alongside Joseph. Their deaths marked a chilling end to a family that had been emblematic of the Nazi regime's fervent loyalty and commitment to Hitler's vision. As news of Hitler's death spread beyond the bunker, the chaos in Berlin intensified. The city was already in a state of turmoil, with Soviet forces advancing rapidly and the German military in disarray. The power vacuum left by Hitler's suicide exacerbated the existing chaos, as various factions within the Nazi regime scrambled to assert control. The atmosphere in Berlin was charged with fear and uncertainty, as civilians and military personnel alike faced the reality of impending defeat. The streets were filled with panic as people attempted to flee the city or find shelter from the relentless bombardment. The sound of artillery fire grew louder, and the once proud capital of the Third Reich was transformed into a battleground. In the wake of Hitler's death, the remaining leaders of the Nazi regime attempted to maintain a semblance of order, but their efforts were largely in vain. The lack of a clear successor and the disintegration of the military command structure led to confusion and infighting among the remaining officials. Figures like Hermann Göring and Heinrich Himmler, who had once been powerful players in the Nazi hierarchy, found themselves at odds with one another as they sought to position themselves as leaders in the absence of Hitler. Göring, in particular, attempted to assert control by declaring himself the new leader of Germany, but his efforts were met with resistance from other factions, further contributing to the chaos. As the Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, the situation became increasingly desperate. The streets were filled with civilians trying to escape the fighting, while soldiers faced the grim reality of defeat. The once loyal supporters of the regime were now confronted with the consequences of their allegiance as the city descended into chaos. Many individuals who had once believed in Hitler's vision found themselves grappling with the reality of their choices as the ideology they had supported crumbled around them. The chaos in Berlin reached a fever pitch as the Soviet troops entered the city on May 2nd, 1945. The fighting was fierce, and the streets became battlegrounds as the remnants of the German military attempted to resist the advancing forces. The atmosphere was one of desperation as civilians sought refuge from the violence and the reality of defeat settled in. The once mighty Nazi regime was reduced to a state of disarray, with its leaders either dead, in hiding, or attempting to flee the city. In the aftermath of Hitler's suicide, the consequences were felt not only in the bunker, but throughout Berlin and beyond. The tragic fate of the Goebbels family served as a stark reminder of the lengths to which individuals would go to maintain their loyalty to a regime that had brought devastation to millions. The chaos that ensued in Berlin highlighted the collapse of a totalitarian state, as the power vacuum left by Hitler's death led to infighting, desperation, and violence. The final days of the Third Reich were marked by a profound sense of loss and despair, as the dreams of a 1,000-year Reich crumbled into dust, leaving behind a legacy of suffering and destruction. In summary, the immediate consequences following Hitler's suicide were characterized by shock and despair among those remaining in the bunker. The tragic fate of key figures like Joseph and Magda Goebbels, and the chaos that engulfed Berlin as the reality of defeat set in. The events that unfolded in the wake of Hitler's death served as a powerful reminder of the fragility of power and the devastating consequences of totalitarianism, marking the end of an era that had irrevocably altered the course of history. In this video, we have explored the harrowing final days of Adolf Hitler, delving into the complex dynamics within the Furabonka and the events that ultimately led to his suicide. We began by examining the historical context surrounding Hitler's last stand, highlighting the dire situation in Germany as Allied forces closed in from both the West and the East. The atmosphere within the bunker was one of desperation and denial, as Hitler and his inner circle grappled with the reality of their impending defeat. This setting served as a microcosm of the broader collapse of the Nazi regime, illustrating the psychological and political dynamics at play during this pivotal moment in history. One of the key takeaways from our discussion is the portrayal of Hitler as a deeply flawed individual, whose physical and mental decline mirrored the disintegration of the Third Reich. The film Downfall effectively captures this complexity, presenting a more human side of Hitler, while also emphasizing the monstrous consequences of his actions. As we analyze the interactions between Hitler and his generals, we noted the tension that arose from their loyalty to a leader who was increasingly disconnected from reality. This dynamic underscores the importance of understanding the psychological factors that can lead individuals to commit atrocities, as well as the consequences of blind loyalty in the face of moral ambiguity. We also highlighted the emotional moments shared between Hitler and Eva Braun, which served to humanize them amid the chaos. Their tragic decision to end their lives together reflects the profound impact of their choices and the lengths to which individuals will go to maintain their beliefs, even in the face of overwhelming despair. The reactions of those remaining in the bunker, including figures like Joseph Goebbels and his family, further illustrated the complexities of loyalty and the moral dilemmas faced by individuals caught in a totalitarian regime. As we move through the immediate aftermath of Hitler's suicide, we discussed the chaos that ensued in Berlin. The power vacuum left by his death led to infighting among Nazi leaders, while the city itself descended into turmoil as Soviet forces advanced. This period marked the end of an era, as the dreams of a 1,000-year Reich crumbled into dust, leaving behind a legacy of suffering and destruction. The events of these final days serve as a powerful reminder of the fragility of power and the devastating consequences of totalitarianism. The historical significance of Hitler's last days cannot be overstated. They provide crucial insights into the psychological and political dynamics that shaped the course of World War II and the subsequent reconstruction of Europe. Understanding these events allows us to reflect on the impact of totalitarian regimes on modern history and the importance of safeguarding democracy and human rights. As we consider the lessons learned from this dark chapter, it becomes clear that the consequences of unchecked power and blind loyalty can reverberate through time, shaping the world we live in today. We encourage you, our viewers, to reflect on the implications of these events and their relevance to contemporary discussions about leadership, accountability, and the dangers of authoritarianism. The story of Hitler's last days serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us of the importance of critical thinking and the need to question the narratives presented by those in power. By engaging with history, we can better understand the complexities of human behavior and the societal dynamics that can lead to both great triumphs and devastating tragedies. If you found this video insightful and thought-provoking, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for more historical content. Your support helps us continue to explore the intricacies of history and share these important narratives with a wider audience. Don't forget to like and share this video with friends and family who may also be interested in learning about the complexities of our past. Together, we can foster a deeper understanding of history and its impact on our present and future. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the final days of Adolf Hitler and the lessons we can draw from this pivotal moment in history.